Morning, everyone. I'm always interested in the real stories of something, right? Like when you hear numbers, and coronavirus is all numbers, when you hear just numbers, it kind of dehumanizes it, right? So something like this is Sally and David's son and his wife, their daughter-in-law, and they're, sorry for the pause face, they're giving an update because Sally and David can't give their own updates. They're in a new hospital. It's not a great update. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, the link is in the description. I'm not going to talk about this too much. This is interesting to me. I think that, well, when you live in history, right? Like I think that people will read about what happens right now. And when you live it, it's so interesting to look at it in a way that makes it as human as possible, right? Like the numbers are going to be the numbers forever. But I mean, just being able to see, in a first-hand account, man, wild. Here is Justin Trudeau, on to Canada, taking Mr. Scheer to task for daring to say we have laws in place, we should arrest the people who are on private property blocking our critical infrastructure. He said that on February 18th. And on February 18th, well, that disqualified him from having a meeting with the other party leaders, including the leader of the Bloc, including the Greens and the NDP and Mr. Trudeau and some cabinet ministers who were directly meeting with people, etc. So Scheer was disqualified, to use Trudeau's words. And this is, look at when the reporter asks, Trudeau lights up, like his face just like, ooh, he's very happy that he's asked this question. Here we go.
Mr. Scheer disqualified himself from constructive discussions with his unacceptable speech earlier today.
He disqualified himself from, his terrible speech earlier today. And then 4 days later, 3 days later, 4 days later, whatever. Yesterday was the 21st. That's when this happened. Mr. Trudeau gives this speech. Now, for added fun, for added hilarity, instead of watching Mr. Trudeau, watch Miss Freeland. Because it's like she's also giving the speech, except she's not moving her mouth. And somebody else pointed this out on Twitter yesterday, and it just made my night. I was howling. Watch her face, and watch her eyes, okay? If you're watching on YouTube, watch her eyes. It's nothing but, well, watch it. It's funny. Here we go.
Earlier today, I once again convened a meeting with the Incident Response Group to address the blockades. And here's the reality. Every attempt at dialogue has been made, but discussions have not been productive. We can't have dialogue when only one party is coming to the table. For this reason, we have no choice but to stop making the same overtures. Of course, we will never close the door on dialogue, and our hand remains extended should someone want to reach for it. In fact, Ministers Miller and Bennett just got off a call with the Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chief just minutes ago. But the fact remains. The barricades must now come down. The injunctions must be obeyed, and the law must be upheld. Let me be clear. Our resolve to pursue the reconciliation agenda with Indigenous peoples is as strong as ever. There are historic wrongs to right. There are gaps to be closed. There is a relationship to be renewed and new relationships to be built. Canada is ready for this. Canadians want this. But hurting Canadian families from coast to coast to coast does nothing to advance the cause of reconciliation. And that.
Okay, so and that's where he ends the press conference, and he takes questions. And the questions are, what are you saying to police who are standing there ready to enforce the injunctions and such? And he doubles down and says, yes, they should be enforced. So, but doesn't that disqualify him from the meeting with the Greens? And I don't know. It's pretty interesting to, be that overjoyed when you get the Andrew Scheer question, right? And be able to toss him right under that bus while simultaneously not listening to him, while simultaneously preaching to Canadians that listening and being inclusive and listening to all sides is the way we solve problems in Canada. it's talking about both sides of your mouth. And to Trudeau's base, it kind of works because they don't care, right? Like, they're not paying attention to politics. They don't care. So it works for him until he does something like this, right? Until he has to admit that Andrew Scheer was right. The rule of law needs to be followed. And I mean, I think it's really odd that Trudeau's still casting this as reconciliation, because this isn't reconciliation. These people aren't Wet'suwet'en, and nobody believes that they are. Like, the Wet'suwet'en people themselves are saying we're being bullied. We're being spoken for without our consent. So, I mean, having Trudeau and the press legitimize this is almost on par with the abuses of years past, right? Like, they're just allowing these people to usurp the Wet'suwet'en name and ignore the elected chiefs who signed agreements with these companies, and then allowed the RCMP and everyone else to stand by while people hummed and hawed about what's the law. The law is what the law is. Rule of law. You guys keep saying it and you don't know what it means. It's really, really weird. So, and when Trudeau has to step in it like this, and again, talking out of both sides of his mouth, so maybe his base will like the fact that he's, speaking strongly about the blockades finally. I have no idea. But really, I think this makes him look bad. It makes him look like he's trying to score cheap political points on the backs of a crisis. And it failed. It fell flat. And then making this whole thing about reconciliation fails. It falls flat because it's just not true, right? Here's the CTV News. Barricades must now come down, PM Trudeau says of rail blockages. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is calling for the end of the blockades that have shut down major railways across Canada. The injunctions must be obeyed and the law must be upheld, said Trudeau, addressing reporters from the National Press Theatre on Friday afternoon. Canadians who are feeling the very real impact of these blockades are running out of patience. I scroll down. The Prime Minister made the announcement following a gathering of his incident response team on Parliament Hill to determine the next steps to the blockades scattered across the country in support of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs in BC who oppose the construction of a natural gas pipeline across the territory. Now, I saw somebody else on Twitter say, and I think it was the Conservative Party, a high-placed person in the Conservative Party said, basically, didn't the incident response team used to be known as cabinet, and didn't Parliament, like on Parliament Hill, didn't that used to be known as the House of Commons? Like, that's where we decide things, not in this smaller circle of people. And I get that the Prime Minister has to make decisions, but when you have an incident response team that is trotted out to make you look legitimate with your decision making, I don't know. I think that's a miss. National Post is reporting that, yes, the blockades, some of them anyway, are coming down. Here's one in Quebec. It says, Quebec rail blockade abandoned by protesters after riot police arrived to enforce injunction. And it says a blockade south of Montreal had halted rail traffic and frayed nerves since Wednesday was abandoned late Friday after riot police arrived to enforce a court injunction. They took down tents and carried items such as sleeping bags, pots, propane tanks, and a wooden stove to the edge of a security perimeter established earlier in the day by the municipal police force. Then, at around 10 p.m., a spokesman wearing a ski mask and sunglasses announced the rail blockade in St. Lambert, Quebec was ending, but said the fight was not over. Quote, even though the colonial police is removing this barricade with violence and contempt, others will emerge, he said. He added that until the federal government listens to the hereditary chiefs, the RCMP leaves Wet'suwet'en territory and Coastal GasLink scraps the contentious pipeline, the colonial Canadian state will be totally paralyzed. So that's a paraphrasing, I think, of what he said, because the only part that is under quotes is the last part. Anyway, emotions flared earlier in the day as protesters dug into the Canadian National Railway tracks, despite being served with an injunction Thursday that ordered that the site be cleared. Quebec Premier Francois Legault called for the injunction to be enforced rapidly. Police arrive in large numbers Friday afternoon near the encampment. There were several rounds of talks between police and the masked protesters as the impasse continued. Some people chose to leave. Yeah, I mean, when you see the riot police show up and everybody encircles your camp, I'd be like, I'm out of here too. But I don't think I'd be out there in the first place, but still. Here is Harley Munro, and this is Harley Munro, I believe, right here. And he says, as a Canadian First Nations iron worker, I support Canada's ethical oil and gas developments, not the lying, misinformed Liberals and do-nothing Democrats. The protesters need to wake up to reality and quit blaming others for their own stupid choices and failures. And so he's here and he's saying, see this is oil and gas. This is the end result. People, First Nations people, a whole bunch of them show up and buy gas here, and maybe you should protest here. Like, maybe that'll be more effective. And then he proceeds to say, you don't understand how the world works, basically. And I think that he's got a lot of valid points. So you can watch this. It's only a minute and a half long. Link is in the description. I think it's worth the watch. This was odd. I saw this morning, and this is an Ontario news story. Mike Crawley is doing a live report, and this security guard gets in the shot and tells him, this is private property, you've got to leave. And public sidewalks generally aren't private property, right? Like, maybe if this is an arena and this is like a courtyard in the arena, then he'd maybe have an argument. But like, usually a public sidewalk is a public sidewalk. So I don't know. I think the security guard overstepped. The Ford government apologized, but there is a video here. I was going to read this. I'm not going to read this. I don't think I need to read this. But the Ford government did apologize. But you should have a watch of this, just because it's very well. This is how they shut down free speech. They try and look legitimate, right? Like, this guy is just trying to do his job. The security guard, he doesn't care one way or the other, right? Like, this is his job. Somebody's told him that guy can't do that there, and he says, okay, fine, I'm going to go and enforce that. And he uses the police as a threat. Move along before the police get here. And I think that it's chilling when citizen reporters are being limited by YouTube and silenced by, not critics necessarily, but silenced in ways that they haven't been in the past, in Canada anyway. But there's a very, very large history of silencing people in the past using legitimate means, right? Like using the courts, using gag orders, using security guards to say you're trespassing, right? Like this is how they lend legitimacy to the chilling of free speech, because you think twice about that next time, right? Like it's a very carrot stick approach, and this is a different carrot and stick than they use with somebody like me, a YouTube person, right? Like, they pay me for videos that don't talk about things they don't like. So if I stay away from coronavirus, or if I stay away from Iran, or if I stay away from all those, hot button issues, then my video's monetized. But if I talk about those things, my video is demonetized, right? Carrot and stick. We'll pay you if you just shut up, right? And it's very interesting watching the CBC reporter be intimidated in this way too. I don't think necessarily it's a PC problem. I think that the Liberals engage in this too. I've seen it happen in my community. It's incredible, right? And so it's rampant. It's not going away, it doesn't seem. And the more they do it, the more happy with themselves they seem, right? They seem like they think that this is getting away with something, but they don't realize it's a slippery slope. And they don't realize that those same tactics will be used on them when they're on the other side of a topic, when they disagree finally with the will of the woke counterculture, the woke culture at this point that's sliding down the water slide at a breakneck speed. When they get to the point where they no longer agree, well, that woke mob is going to come after them. They don't realize that yet, but it's going to happen. So, I mean, it's very interesting, right? With these legitimate tactics, sir, you need to leave. I'm the security guard. You don't want the police to get here. Get out of here. I'm just doing a job, and I know you're just doing a job, but get out of here. We don't have to, we can't question the jobs. We can't question how legitimate this is. Just get out of here, because my boss told me so. Wow, right? Canada, 2020. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Check out CanadaPoly.com, and have a wonderful, wonderful